This week on Africa Weekly, we make a splash in South Africa, where surfers are increasingly opting for wooden boards over the more common foam option for a smoother, more environmentally friendly ride. Then we head to the Seychelles, commonly known as a tropical Eden, with idyllic beaches, but where around 5% of the population are addicted to heroin. First, let's take a look at the stories that made the headlines this week. Nigeria announced the first case of coronavirus in sub-Saharan Africa. The case is an Italian citizen who worked in Nigeria and returned from Milan earlier this week. But most Nigerians remain unperturbed.
If we can beat Ebola, we can beat anything, no matter how deadly the virus is. So we have the Nigerian spirit and we can beat the virus.
The low number of cases across Africa, which has close economic ties with China, the epicenter of the deadly outbreak, has puzzled health specialists. Prior to the case in Nigeria, there'd been just 2 cases across the continent in Egypt and Algeria. The World Health Organization warned earlier this week that African health systems were ill-equipped to respond should cases start to proliferate on the continent. To Guinea-Bissau next, where opposition leader Umaro Sissoco Embalo swore himself in as the new president, defying a bitter ongoing row about the outcome of elections 2 months ago. Embalo won over 50% of the votes in December's runoff, while Domingos Simões Pereira from the PAIGC won just over 46%, but denounced the result as fraudulent. Intervention by the Supreme Court has failed to resolve the dispute between the Supreme Court and the election panel, which confirmed the results that it had previously announced. Egypt held a military funeral for former President Hosni Mubarak, whose 3 decades of strong arm rule ended in the Arab Spring protests of 2011. The government of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi declared 3 days of mourning for Mubarak, who died aged 91 in a Cairo military hospital on Tuesday after years spent in relative seclusion. Turkey's president said 2 Turkish troops had been killed in Libya, a country racked by conflict between its UN-recognised government and the forces of strongman Khalifa Haftar. Turkey supports the UN-recognised government of national accord and sent dozens of military training personnel after the 2 countries signed deals last year. Mali's ambassador to France has complained to the French Senate of problems caused by French Foreign Legion soldiers deployed on Malian soil to help combat an Islamic insurgency.
Je vous dis, en vous regardant droit dans les yeux, que par moment,
I'm telling you, at times you see them in the red light districts of Bamako, covered in tattoos, behaving in a way that does not correspond to the national army we know. It makes people afraid, it makes tongues wag and raises questions.
Alors ça fait peur, ça intrigue et ça pose des questionnements.
The African Union says it expects to send a temporary deployment of 3,000 troops to West Africa's Sahel region, where regional forces are struggling to respond to a nearly 8-year-old insurgency by armed Islamists. The decision was made at the African Union summit earlier this month, but the announcement officially took place at a press conference on Thursday.
As dawn breaks over Muizenberg, Cape Town, the conditions are just right for a morning surf. Matthew looks like any other surfer, but with a twist. His surfboard is made from wood.
For me, it reinvigorated my love for surfing because it's a whole new feel. It paddles differently, it rides differently. Yeah, you know, surfing's all about the feel.
Patrick handcrafts each board, and most are made from sustainably sourced Japanese cedar wood found on South Africa's east coast. They're hollowed out to make them lighter, a technique that was abandoned in the early 1950s for newer, more competitive boards. For Patrick, these beautiful boards are all about the design.
Wood is a unique material and we need to design for that. And so the board shapes that I've chosen, I think, are matched towards wood. And so those shapes go really, really well. You know, I wouldn't take a performance shortboard and make it in wood and expect it to be a success.
More sustainable than conventional polyurethane foam boards, Patrick hesitates to call them environmentally friendly, but the boards are definitely a step in the right direction.
Whatever you make, there's a footprint, and whatever your inputs are, there's always going to be something that's not good for the environment. It's better to be honest about that and say, like, hey, look, I'm using a polyurethane wood glue. That's definitely not good for the environment. I'd love to mitigate it, but there's nothing available at the moment.
Patrick has made 850 of these boards over the last decade, not one exactly the same as the other. It's a drop in the ocean if you look at the large-scale production of modern boards, but for surfers like him, this board truly is one of a kind.
The Seychelles are known for their idyllic coastline and luxury resorts, but just a few miles away is a very different scene. In the suburbs of the capital Victoria, people queue up for the distribution of methadone, a heroin replacement drug. Government figures showed that nearly 5,000 people are addicted to heroin, representing about 5% of the population.
Sometimes I take, but I want to stop it, just to do the methadone to stop it, but it's still a little bit hard.
With the rise of new trafficking routes through East Africa in the late 2000s, the archipelago was hit hard by the influx of heroin, and authorities were caught off guard.
When we did the survey in 2011, and we found out that we had around 1,200 youths using heroin, we should have acted then, but we didn't. What we did, we increased the sentences. The major problem is for many years, the approach has been a punitive one.
By 2017, as heroin addiction had risen fourfold, the government changed its approach and began treating it as a disease. This helped people like Graham, who started using when he was only 10 years old, to get clean.
Difficult, very difficult. I was stealing, my family pushed me away. I sleeping everywhere, even to eat. No get. There are times not eat, only you get the money, but you don't go to buy the food. You go to buy your heroin. And when you finish with the heroin, you say, man, how are you going to get something to eat?
Early studies showed that since the government changed its approach from punishment to prevention, health and social problems linked to heroin use have declined. But questions remain as to how and why the problem got so bad in these idyllic islands.
A jubilant mood is sweeping Guinea's capital, Conakry, as parties campaign ahead of parliamentary elections and a referendum on constitutional reform. Guineans will vote on whether they want to adopt a new constitution. This comes after months of protests sparked by charges that it's a trick by President Alpha Condé to stay in power. And finally, Nigerian Kenneth Ize made a storming Paris Fashion Week debut with his fairy godmother, supermodel Naomi Campbell, closing the show. The 29-year-old has had a meteoric rise to the Paris catwalk and in part attributed that success to Campbell's support.
She's been there since day one. You know, she's really pushed it. She's pushed it to this level that it's now here in Paris. And yeah, I hope, and yeah, not I hope, I am going to stay here and I'm going to keep showing that, and I'm going to keep showing the world what I have and my vision and my goals and my ability and my knowledge and my success and my love and my kindness and my happiness and my refreshment and my joy and my peacefulness and everything. I'm going to do that.
That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.